If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Welcome to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello, today we have Sonia interviewing John about natural morality. We are continuing from the previous episode today. We hope you enjoy.
Chamberlain plays an English ship captain, a pilot, who gets shipwrecked with his men in Japan in the year 1600, and he's in trouble, obviously. Japanese are hostile. He can't speak their language. They can't speak his. There are Jesuit missionaries there, Spanish Jesuit missionaries who could act as translators. The problem is that the Spanish and the English are mortal enemies at this point. They're already mortal enemies over the destruction of the Spanish Armada in 1588. But now the Protestant Netherlands has risen up in revolt against their overlords, the Spanish Catholic Spain, and England has been helping them. Nevertheless, Chamberlain plays the character John Blackthorne. He's called Anjin, or Anjin-san by the Japanese. He has to rely on them to translate fairly. And he's brought before the local warlord, Toranaga, and he's being interviewed. And the Jesuit is translating accurately, but he knows what to pick and choose to make Blackthorne look bad. And at one point, the translator mentions to Toranaga that the English are helping the Dutch against their proper overlords. And at this, Toranaga becomes very angry because that's the biggest sin in their culture of the time. You know, loyalty to your liege lord is the greatest good. He becomes very angry, and he says through the translator that this is something wrong. You mustn't do that. The Dutch are wrong. And Blackthorne desperately says, oh, they're extenuating circumstances. Toranaga fires back, in rebellion against your liege lord, there are no mitigating circumstances. To which Blackthorne responds, he says, unless you win. Toranaga laughs long and loud, and he says, yes, Anjin-san, you have named the one mitigating circumstance. I'm not sure how anybody would think to get away with this. In order to convict the Nazis at the Nuremberg trial, you didn't have to base that case on any kind of objective moral law. You were able to convict them because you won the war. They were your prisoners. The war could have gone the other way. What if the Nazis had won? Would they have had to show you, to convict you, that international law, nature's law, was on their side? Of course not. They would have had a very, very different view. They would have said that you are against nature's law. Nature's law is evolution. We should be moving towards developing the Superman. You were against that. You were wrong. So the reality, I don't understand why such an example was chosen. And again, no way to prove. No way to prove that the Allied culture was closer to this supposed moral law than the Nazi culture was. Of course, I think it was. But it doesn't prove it. The reality is the Nazis were judged by the Allies because the Allies won the war. Had the Nazis won the war, they would have been judging the Allies on very different principles. So that's a problem, which you correctly identified. And there's another problem. You remember what we saw before from the Dr. Craig video and from Sean McDowell, that we know there's a natural law because everybody knows it. It's just obvious. Everybody knows it. And now Turek is forced to say, well, not everybody knows it. It really doesn't matter. Well, how can it not matter if this is the way we know it? Now, again, he goes to the torture babies example, and as terrible as it is, there are people who don't realize that that's wrong. And so we still have not managed to justify that second premise necessary for this moral argument for God to work. It just hasn't been done. Well, let's listen to some more from Dr. Turek and see if he's able to finally bring this home.
This is the start of the recording from the YouTube video.
I'd say atheists approach the viewpoint of what is good and bad for society, and they see it
Okay, time out. As soon as they import the word good, they're appealing to a standard beyond themselves.
Okay.
Okay, so they're smuggling in a moral law to make their atheistic system work. And as soon as you start talking about good, bad, right, wrong, you're appealing to a standard beyond just human opinion. And that standard is what we mean by God's nature.
This is the end of the recording from the YouTube video.
Now here Turek has been answering, after one of his lectures, a challenge by an atheist. I don't think that atheist was doing a very good job here. But you remember, you notice that Turek cut him off and said as soon as they import the word good, they're appealing to a standard beyond themselves. They're smuggling in moral law to make their atheist system work. And as soon as you start talking about good, bad, right, wrong, you're appealing to a standard beyond just human opinion. And that standard is what we mean by God's nature. Unfortunately, there's another huge logical fallacy here, again, from the side that's pushing for objective moral values. What is the logical fallacy here? Did you catch it?
Well, what's meant by good? Because I didn't see the whole video, but what Turek means by good might not be the same thing as what the atheist arguing meant by good.
Yes, it's an example of what's called the fallacy of equivocation. Turek is treating the word good as if it's univocal and necessarily means you're appealing to a standard beyond just human opinion. And so as soon as this atheist uses the word good, Turek jumps on and says, see, you're smuggling in this idea of moral law. But that's absolutely not correct. The idea that the word good can only ever be used for an objective standard for God's nature is just absolutely not correct. Consider, we'll go to Doctor Who again. This is from the beginning of episode 4 of Pyramids of Mars, where the Doctor is facing this powerful foe called Sutekh, who's utterly evil. And the Doctor is trying to explain why he's opposing him because he's evil. Now listen to Sutekh's response.
This is the start of the recording from the YouTube video.
Use your powers for evil.
Evil? Your evil is my good. I am Sutekh the Destroyer. Where I tread, I leave nothing but dust and darkness. I find that good.
This is the end of the recording from the YouTube video.
So here we have Sutekh saying that. And agree with him or not, he is speaking of good in terms of what he thinks is good. It's not based on anything external to himself. He's not appealing to a standard beyond just human opinion, though he's not human. But people say good because this seems good to them. They may very well agree there's no objective definition of good, but that doesn't mean they can't think that some things are good. It's not based on some kind of objective moral law out there in the atmosphere somewhere. To them, it's just, well, we decide. And that's how the atheist is using the term. And Turek's response, okay, trying to say that, well, anytime you talk about good, you mean you're agreeing with me on this. It has to be an absolute standard, a standard outside of human being. No, that's equivocation, and it's stacking the deck. It's well and good to claim that the atheist's standard of good is not objective, and it isn't. But you can't claim that they cannot use the term good according to their own standards of what they think is good. Now let's look at one more clip here from Dr. Turek.
This is the start of the recording from the YouTube video.
You got two
Good
options
in general.
here. Either
Good in
we
general
have
in
human
society.
opinion, or we have a nature, a good nature, a righteous justice nature outside of ourselves. Now, none of us believes that. We believe that the Nazis were wrong because we're appealing to a standard outside of ourselves.
This is the end of the recording from the YouTube video.
All right, so here we saw Turek say you've got two options here. Either you have human opinion, or we have a nature, a good nature, a righteous justice nature outside of ourselves. Now, none of us believes that. We believe that the Nazis were wrong because we're appealing to a standard outside ourselves.
Well, there's still the issue that maybe the Nazis didn't believe that the Nazis are wrong.
Yes, and you cannot prove that the standard you're appealing to is objectively true. And once again, all I can do is retreat to an argumentum ad populum, appeal to the masses, appeal to the people, where he says, none of us believes that. So none of us believes that this is just based on human opinion. Well, again, if none of us believes that, that doesn't prove its truth. So unfortunately, as you look through the various Christian apologists, philosophers who appeal to the moral argument from God, they seem to be coming from the same playbook. They make the same kind of arguments. We've seen that from 3 different apologists now, and they just don't work because you cannot, at the end of the day, you cannot prove the second premise, that objective moral values exist. The best attempts to do that really don't. Now, you could possibly browbeat an atheist student who asks the question and isn't properly prepared, but against a cunning atheist, it will not work. A clever atheist would shred this kind of argument. So I don't think we should be using the moral argument to try to prove God. It just doesn't work, and we don't need it. We absolutely don't need it. The reality of creation, the reality of the fact that the world is here, ordered, structured world, and we are in it, ordered, structured beings with brains that are the most complex things in the entire universe. And science has already shown that it's absolutely impossible for these things to come about by natural processes. So our logic then is we are here. That's a fact. That one is proven. We're here. The world is here. We have to have come from somewhere. We were either created or not created. And that's, according to the logical axiom of the law of the excluded middle, has to be one or the other of those. Because a proposition and its negation cover all possibilities. You're either created or you go into the not created category. If you're not created, you must have come about by random naturalistic processes. Somehow matter, energy, information had to come into being from nothing. Randomly scattered matter had to self-assemble into extremely complex, ordered, and meaningful structures, eventually come together into a cell. And again, a simple cell is more complicated than if you took the entire city of Los Angeles, turned it into an automated factory, micro-miniaturized it. That still wouldn't be quite as complex as a cell. And so you'd need to have an awful lot of these coming together by random processes. And if they did, they would have to come to life at that point. And then they would have to give rise to qualitatively new genetic data as they go from single cell up to apes and humans and so on. And science has proven every one of those is impossible. First off, thermodynamics has proven that you absolutely cannot get matter energy coming out of nothing, cannot have been eternally existent either, otherwise you couldn't reach any specific point in time, yet here we are in 2022. Second law of thermodynamics, the most certain law in all of science, tells you if you have a random assortment of matter, it cannot self-assemble into complex ordered structures. And the law of biogenesis tells you that you cannot have non-living matter ever come to life. And so on. It's absolutely impossible. And so you have to admit that God exists. That's the only argument we really need for the existence of God.
Well, why do you think this moral argument is still popular then? Is it that people use it when they're communicating with people who are not well-versed in science or something?
Well, perhaps the people using it are themselves not well-versed in science. I think the reason they use it, one, is they perhaps feel that one argument for the existence of God isn't enough. We need to have another one. Two, perhaps they just haven't looked at it that carefully or been challenged by a clever enough atheist to the point where they realize that it's just not valid. So those might be the reasons they use, but I don't think we should be using it. It's not a valid argument. It's not a sound argument.
Okay, well, thank you, John, and we'll see what you have to say for next topic.
All right, thanks for joining us, Sonia.
Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.